Welcome to the news report for day 432 of the war in Ukraine. Thank you for joining me. You are listening to The Account. Today I have two extra news segments. The first is the latest on the Pavlohrad explosion, and the second is about the latest Russian mass missile attack on Ukraine. All other updates are grouped into the usual situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and international developments. Before we start the news though, the flashpoints along the front. Bakhmut. Russia's pace of advancement inside Bakhmut has slowed considerably compared to previous days. Currently, the Ukrainian defenders are in a slightly better position to defend, as Russia has to attack uphill now. Localized counteroffensives by Ukrainian defenders stabilized the situation somewhat. According to Serhiy Cherevati, spokesman for the Eastern Group of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Russia has deployed about 25,600 soldiers in and around Bakhmut. The Wagner mercenaries remain Russia's main strike force in the sector. Colonel General Alexander Syrskyi, commander of Ukraine's ground forces, reported about the counterattacks, stating that Russia abandoned several positions. According to White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby, the US believes that over the past 5 months, Russia has lost more than 100,000 soldiers on the Bakhmut front, including more than 20,000 killed in battle, almost half of whom are Wagner Group soldiers. Avdiivka. The situation in Avdiivka has calmed down considerably. Although Russia is throwing a lot of manpower and equipment at Pervomaiske, the front is more or less bogged down in that area. And to start the news segment, the latest updates on the Pavlohrad explosion. The chairman of the movement We Are Together with Russia, Vladimir Rogov, claimed that the explosion in Pavlohrad destroyed the resources of 3 brigades of the armed forces of Ukraine, which were destined for the Zaporizhzhia front. More videos showing the explosion and ensuing shockwave were shared on social media during the day. These videos are important since one of them was geolocated to the settlement next to Pavlohrad, with the filming angle marked here in red. This very much contradicts the Russian story that the train station, marked in blue, was hit. Instead, it is highly likely the chemical plant was indeed hit by the attack. According to the State Emergency Service of Ukraine, 24 high-rise buildings, 80 private residential buildings, 9 schools and preschools, and 5 shops were damaged. 40 private residential buildings were damaged in Verbivska territorial community. So far, 34 people, including 5 children, were reported to be injured. Tonight, President Volodymyr Zelensky, in his May 1st evening address, updated the casualty numbers. As a result of the attack on Pavlohrad, 2 people have been killed and 40 injured. And now for the updates on Russia's latest mass missile attack. During the night, air raid sirens started sounding throughout Ukraine. The takeoff of several strategic bombers from Engels 2 Air Base and other airfields were reported. Explosions were reported in Kyiv, and an industrial facility was hit in Zhytomyr Oblast. The Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine's armed forces, Valery Zaluzhny, reported that 15 out of 18 air-launched cruise missiles were intercepted. During last night's missile attacks, at least 34 people were injured. This number includes those injured in the Pavlohrad explosion. A look at all the minor updates out of Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky has submitted bills on the extension of martial law and mobilization in Ukraine to the Verkhovna Rada. Oleksiy Danilov, Secretary of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, talked about the 15 reasons why Ukraine wants Russia in its current form to disappear. Please check out the reasons yourself, as this is rather long. Oleksiy Reznikov, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, talked in an interview about regarding the reported ammunition shortage, Ukraine has prepared enough reserves for the counteroffensive. Ukraine already has Leopard and Challenger tanks and a large number of armored combat vehicles. and Reznikov is confident that Ukraine will receive modern fighter jets of the fourth generation from the US. In the Odesa region, the security service detained an employee of a local chemical plant who was passing information to Russia about the locations of the defense forces and industrial facilities in the region. Starting tomorrow on May 2nd, journalists who want to enter the combat zone will need a new press card. The old version will be invalid. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. Another staff rotation of the permanent monitoring mission of the International Atomic Energy Agency took place at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Mikhail Razvoshaev, the head of the Russian occupation government of Sevastopol, said the city was attacked by drones today, adding that one of the drones was shot down. According to Krim Reali media outlet, sounds similar to the work of air defense were previously heard in the city. Irina Vereshchuk, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Reintegration of the temporarily occupied territories, contrary to the Ombudsman advice, has called on residents of the temporarily occupied territories not to accept Russian passports and not to cooperate with the invaders in any way. Russian occupation authorities are preparing for a possible future evacuation from the territory of the temporarily occupied Zaporizhzhia Oblast. According to Ivan Fedorov, the mayor of Melitopol, Ukrainian reconnaissance officers identified the location of Russian military headquarters in the occupied village of Mikhailivka in Zaporizhzhia Oblast, and Ukraine's defense forces struck the headquarters. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. Power lines were blown up in Russia's Leningrad Oblast overnight. Russian authorities found what was presumably an explosive device in Leningrad Oblast, Governor Alexander Drozdenko said. Power supply to populated areas and civil infrastructure was allegedly not disrupted. According to Alexander Bogomas, the governor of Bryansk Oblast of Russia, a train carrying fuel and construction material has derailed as a result of an explosion near the tracks in Russia's Bryansk Oblast, which borders Ukraine. The locomotive and 7 wagons derailed due to the incident and caused a fire to break out. As a result, railway traffic in that direction has been suspended. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. Larisa Herasko, the Ukrainian ambassador to Ireland, has called on people to stop buying Jameson whiskey in protest at the company's decision to resume trade in Russia. South Africa is trying to persuade Russian President Vladimir Putin to avoid the BRICS summit in August due to the International Criminal Court's warrant. 68 representatives of the opposition, among them politicians, scientists, journalists and activists who left Russia, publicly signed a declaration calling the war in Ukraine criminal and demanding the elimination of Putin's regime, as well as the release of political prisoners and prisoners of war. And now for the intelligence report segment, starting with the UK Ministry of Defence. Since summer 2022, Russia has constructed some of the most extensive systems of military defensive works seen anywhere in the world for many decades. These defenses are not just near the current front lines, but have also been dug deep inside areas Russia currently controls. Imagery shows that Russia has made a particular effort to fortify the northern border of occupied Crimea, including with a multi-layer defensive zone near the village of Medvedevka. Russia has also dug hundreds of miles of trenches well inside internationally recognized Russian territory, including in the Belgorod and Kursk regions. The defense highlights Russian leaders' deep concern that Ukraine could achieve a major breakthrough. However, some works have likely been ordered by local commanders and civil leaders in attempts to promote the official narrative that Russia is threatened by Ukraine and NATO. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. ISW is publishing a special edition campaign assessment today, April 30th. This report details changes in the Russian military command since Russia began its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin's decision to invade Ukraine without a clear and doctrinal command structure and his reluctance to appoint an overall theater commander have had lasting effects on the structure of the Russian command in Ukraine. Putin's regular command changes have led to an increasingly factionalized Russian military and disorganized command structures that are degrading the Russian military's ability to conduct a cohesive campaign in Ukraine. Factions are not a phenomenon particular to the Russian military, although their current dynamics within the Russian military are shaping decision-making to an unusual degree. The Russian Ministry of Defense, MOD, and the Kremlin has been deliberately vague about most of these command changes. ISW's timeline of the changes is based on official Russian statements as well as analysis of unconfirmed claims and reports from Russian, Ukrainian, and Western sources. The exact dates of command changes are based on the first reporting of a change and may not correspond with the formal date on which a change occurred. These command changes were likely not discrete events resulting from decisions made suddenly, but were instead drawn-out bureaucratic affairs. The assessment is quite long. If you're interested in details, please check it out. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. Today, the Russian Federation launched another massive missile attack on civilian objects of our state. The Russian aggressor cynically continues to use terror tactics. In total, during the day, the enemy carried out 19 missile strikes. Our defenders successfully destroyed 15 enemy cruise missiles of the KH-101 and KH-555 types, carried out 13 airstrikes, and launched 13 attacks from rocket salvo systems. Unfortunately, there are dead and wounded civilians, including children. High-rise residential buildings, private residential buildings, schools, hospitals, kindergartens, and other civilian infrastructure were destroyed and damaged. The probability of further missile and airstrikes on the entire territory of Ukraine remains high. The enemy continues to focus its main efforts on conducting offensive operations in the Liman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and Marinka directions. More than 30 enemy attacks were repelled during the day. Bakhmut and Marinka remain in the epicenter of hostilities. Our soldiers courageously hold the defense. In the Liman direction, the enemy tried to improve the tactical position, led unsuccessful offensive actions in the Novoselivske and Bilohorivka areas. In the Bakhmut direction, the enemy continues to conduct offensive actions. Fighting continues in the city of Bakhmut. Also, the enemy carried out unsuccessful offensive actions in the direction of the settlement of Pretechine. In the Avdiivka direction, the enemy carried out offensive actions in the Pervomaiske region of the Donetsk Oblast without success. In the Marinka direction, the enemy continues to attack the positions of the defense forces. Battles continue for Marinka. And that concludes another report. Should you be interested in any articles I mention and want to read up on them, you can find links to them in the description. If you enjoyed the report and found it informative, please consider sharing it with others and giving me a like. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.